because our live people that are on our YouTube Live, we want them to be able to hear your question and Cordell's answer. So if you want to go back and look at this after today, you can do so right after this class is over. Go ahead, Cordell.
Okay, so good afternoon, everybody. Again, my name's Cordell Bagari, and I work in the Certification and Compliance Division of the Department of Procurement Services. And we're going to talk about our certification programs, which I'm sure all of you would have an interest in. Before I begin, is there anyone in the audience that's involved in a business right now, business owner at all? You are? Okay. Okay, several of you. And some of you, I gather, are getting ready to start. So needless to say, you're all in the right place. This is what we're going to do. We're going to talk about certification and what we do. The Department of Procurement Services is a contracting authority for the procurement of goods and services for the city of Chicago. We work together as a team and with our customers to guarantee an open, fair, and timely process by establishing, communicating, and enforcing superior business practices. To give you a little insight, the Department of Procurement Services is generally responsible for the procurement of goods and services totaling, averaging about $2 billion a year. So we are the contracting authority for all the city departments, as well as other certain agencies that are involved with that. To that end, in the Certification and Compliance Division, we're responsible for the administration of approximately 6 different certification programs. We're going to talk a little bit about them all. To give you an idea, the MBE program is for minority-owned businesses. The WBE acronym stands for Women-Owned Business Enterprises. We have a program for veteran-owned businesses called VBE, and one for businesses that are owned by people with disabilities we refer to as BEPD. Those are our local programs that are governed under the city's ordinance, and we set the rules and regulations for those programs. In addition to the ones I just mentioned, there are 2 others that are considered federal programs. They're known as the DBE, Disadvantaged Business Enterprise, and ACDBE for businesses that are involved at the airport as a concession. It's called Airport Concessions, Disadvantaged Business Enterprise. These 2 programs are actually governed under federal regulations that are set forth by the Department of, Department of Transportation. So they're all basically the same, but they're governed by 2 different governing bodies, if you will. To sum it up, though, all the programs are basically tools that are designed to help small businesses to more or less participate in opportunities with the city of Chicago and try to create that level playing field, if you will. So what we do is basically we administer the programs. We process new applications for certifications. We also work with ongoing firms that are certified through processes that are called annual no-change affidavits, and for some of our programs that require recertification, we're also working with them. Through this process, we're committed to providing information, resources, and tools to assist you in your efforts to compete for these contracting opportunities with the city of Chicago. As part of our responsibilities, we're involved in contract compliance with negotiated contractual goals that are set for our local and federal programs. We set standards for contract participation for these certified firms, as well as DBEs and ACDBEs, and we provide technical assistance through our websites, www.Chicago, City of Chicago Procurement, and also mwdbe.com, which is our online portal for applying for certification. The benefits of certification basically are this. It provides visibility for your business. Once you're certified, you're listed in a directory which is accessible to the general public. You're listed by type of company, the type of service you provide, and also contact information. So if anyone's looking for a particular minority or woman-owned business, for example, that specializes in plumbing, they can go to the directory and get a list of all those that are involved in plumbing. Those that may be involved in consulting, likewise. So you're listed in a directory that's accessible to the general public. And trust me, it's well used. We have minority, women, veteran, and disadvantaged business participation goals that we set on City of Chicago projects, and similarly with our sister agencies like the Board of Education, for example. They're good for that. We also noticed that there's a benefit to being certified as an MBE, WBE with the city, in that private sector firms are also looking to spend their contract dollars on minority and women-owned businesses. So they use our certification as a way of verifying that the people that are participating in those programs are eligible for that. So there are benefits, most certainly, that go beyond just the city's contracts. In addition to that, we have what's called a target market program, where we set aside a particular portion of funds for exclusive bidding to certified minority and women-owned business enterprises. So it basically involves projects, smaller projects, where the participating bidders are all minorities. They get a chance to compete without, for 100% of that opportunity as opposed to a portion. The process of certification basically begins with the rules of qualification. So basically, to begin with, there are qualifying groups that are considered eligible for participation. These groups would consist of African Americans, Hispanic, people of Asian, Native American descent, women, veterans, and people with disabilities. Now, in addition to those qualifying groups, there are other individuals that may not fit into these categories, but are also offered an opportunity to seek certification. Those individuals are pretty much determined on a case-by-case basis upon them proving that they also have been victims of social and economic disadvantage. Our Veteran-Owned Business Enterprise program basically is a new program. It's about 2 years old, and we define veteran-owned businesses as a person who served in the United States Armed Forces and was discharged or separated under not dishonorable conditions. And in evidence that the applicants that are seeking certification as a veteran-owned business should provide what's called a Form DD-214 or DD-215, which is supporting their discharge classifications. And if they don't have that form, we're asking them to contact the VA, the Veterans Administration, to get a copy of discharge papers. Certification requirements, in addition to qualifying as a member of a group that's presumed to be disadvantaged, we also require businesses that are for our local programs to be considered based on our local area. And what we mean by that is that people that are seeking certification as a minority, woman, veteran, or business enterprise with people with disabilities in local programs, they should have their principal place of business and the majority of their full-time workforce situated within the counties of Cook, DuPage, Kane, Lake, McHenry, or Will. And that applies to our local programs because we want basically businesses in our local area to be able to participate in these local opportunities. For our federal programs, DBE and ACDBE, you can be located anywhere in the state of Illinois. And in some cases, you can even come from out of state if you've been certified in your home state prior to that. We require that all businesses that are seeking certification be at least 51% owned, controlled, and managed by an eligible individual. So if we're talking about a minority business program, we want to see 51% of that business owned and controlled, managed by a minority. Likewise, with women-owned businesses, veteran-owned businesses, and businesses that are owned by people with disabilities. The same also applies to DBE and ACDBE certification. So the business size standard would be the next category for certification. The program is targeted for small businesses. We define small businesses in a variety of different ways, but we want you to be considered as a small business. For our local programs, we look at basically firms that are not involved in construction for gross receipts, and we mean like basic sales before expenses, not exceeding $39.9 million. That's averaged over 3 years. So you can be a small business if you're involved and you've not generated average sales over a 3-year period exceeding $39 million. So that's a nice number. For firms that are involved in construction, however, it's a little different. The Small Business Administration has a classification process by which they determine what's considered to be a small business for firms that are involved in different industries. Like, for example, if I'm in construction, let's say I'm a plumber. The SBA might say, okay, the size standard for small businesses that are involved in plumbing should be of such that the gross sales of that business should not exceed an average of $16.5 million over 3 years. So they set that by industry. That number varies. So for construction firms that are seeking certification in our local programs, we ask that they adhere to those SBA size standards, which are broken down by industry. We average them over 5 years. There's an industry classification system known as, we call it NACIS, North American Industrial Classification System, that's also set up by the U.S. government that is used to determine the industry classification for businesses. So like all businesses are classified by industry. So if you're, let's say for example, if you're a consultant, depending on the type of work you do, you're classified in a particular industry segment. I mentioned plumbers, for example. Construction trades are also classified in these industry standards. It's done for every business. So trust me, if you're in business, you fall into a classification already. And if you're going into business, think about the things that you do because that'll have a bearing on how you're classified. So for our DBE programs, we look at the same SBA size standards as well for all the businesses that are out there. So it doesn't matter if you're construction or non-construction. If you're going for certification as a federal DBE program participant, you would need to fall into the size standards that are determined for your business by the SBA. For our airport concession, disadvantaged business enterprises, the federal government has set aside a fixed amount that determines the size standard for that. And that number is roughly $56.4 million averaged over 3 years. So you can operate as a small business at an airport as a concession. Think about that. If your gross sales does not average that $56.4 million, then you're considered a small business. The other aspect of certification involves the personal net worth of the owners. So keep in mind, the certification is targeted to small businesses, individuals are either minority, women, or members that are proven to be socially and economically disadvantaged. You're a small business. But we also take a look at, in many cases, the owners as well. So in some cases, there is a standard of personal net worth for small businesses. For our local programs, if you're not involved in construction, there is no personal net worth standard. You could be extremely wealthy. You could be a billionaire like Mike Bloomberg or people like that, or a governor, for example, and still qualify as a small business owner in that sense. For businesses that are involved in construction, however, the owners are given a personal net worth standard, and that number is currently is set at $2,318,000. If the personal net worth exceeds that amount, you're not considered to be economically disadvantaged and wouldn't be allowed to participate in the program. And on our construction side, that number is adjusted annually and will probably be done again sometime around March or April of this year. For the DBE program, or federal programs, the federal government established a threshold of $1.3 million, basically. So if your net worth is over that, then you're not considered eligible for participation as a DBE or ACDBE. This number is also adjusted periodically by the United States Department of Transportation. And looking at the calculation of net worth, we do take certain things into consideration and exclude them from the calculations, such as we will take out the value of your primary residence and your business and your financial interest in your business. So those things are taken out of the calculation as well when we're looking at your personal net worth. The type of businesses that would qualify for certification, basically, it's most of the traditional forms of business. I have several here. Sole proprietor basically is one. The business that's typically owned by one person, and this person has no legal, let's say, establishment other than the fact that they're in business. In the event that they operate outside of their own name, they may need to get an assumed name certificate. So let's say, for example, my name's Cordell McGarry, I'm a plumber, and I want to go out into business as a plumber, and this is what I advertise myself as Cordell McGarry the plumber. I could do that all day as long as I have credentials that basically talk about, that attest to my being able to do the work. If I changed my business name and said, okay, Cordell McGarry doing business as the best plumber in Chicago, I would need to get an assumed name certificate that says I can use that name. Pretty simple, right? So the other form of business would be a general partnership where two or more people get together and they say, okay, we're gonna provide this service as a group. And typically they may have a partnership agreement that talks about, who's a member of the group and that's such. A more, let's say, traditional form of business would be that of a corporation, which is a legal entity and separate from the individuals that may own it. So typically ownership is held by a group of people in the form of shares of the corporation, and they also basically, this form of ownership allows for people to invest or sell their shares in their ownership as they choose, and the business continues to go on. Basically, what we look for in corporations is determining whether or not they're properly registered with the Secretary of State of Illinois. They typically are also documented by having articles of incorporation, a certificate that basically from the state that says you're certified to do business in this particular corporate name. Corporations also have bylaws which govern the operations of the business, and typically ownership is held in the form of stock certificates whereby an individual may have shares of stock in the corporation, and that evidences the ownership. The transactions that the business may go through are also, let's say, documented in the way of meeting minutes. So corporations generally come together. They may have annual meetings where they elect their officers. They also may develop business strategy and talk about the things that they did before and what they plan to do in the future. All these things are documented in this more formal structure. Another form of organization basically is a limited partnership. And in this particular case, again, it's a group of individuals that come together. You generally have one general partner who pretty much has the liability and responsibility for the business itself. The limited partners in this structure generally are like stakeholders, and they're not liable for any of the debts beyond what they contributed in the business itself. And in any case, if they do business in a name other than, let's say, what they're organized in, they would need to have an assumed name certificate. Okay. The LLC is a popular form of ownership these days, I see, and typically, they're evidenced by having a group of people again come together. Their membership is basically constitutes their ownership in the business, and they have an operating agreement that pretty much governs the business itself. And there's normally one or more members that are designated as managing members with responsibility for managing the affairs of the business. So those are the forms of ownership that we normally look at when we're looking at certification. So you could be an individual applying, like Cordell McGarry, the plumber, or you could take any other form of organization. That could be Cordell McGarry Inc., that could be Cordell McGarry Limited, that could be anything, but structured is legally, and there's a way to document that process. So, suppliers. We have certain types of specialized categories for certification. We look at suppliers as regular dealers that basically a firm that owns, operates, or maintains a store, warehouse, or another type of establishment where they actually hold materials, supplies, or articles of equipment. They sell them, they buy them, and they trade with the public in the normal course of business. So a good example of that could be a hardware, for example, where it's a store where they stock various tools and supplies for use in the industry, and people come to that hardware and they buy those goods, much like that. Another form of supplying could be a distributor, where a distributor basically is an individual that has a direct relationship with a manufacturer of a good or service, where they have this arrangement to sell and distribute those products on behalf of that manufacturer. And typically they may have a specified territory or region for sales, and they're in a way of representing that manufacturer. The goods or products that are sold under this arrangement typically are not available to the general public, and that you just couldn't go to a store and get them. The other category that we look at that are called brokers. And basically, a broker is a person or entity that fills orders by purchasing or receiving supplies for a third-party supplier rather than buying it out of their own inventory or maintaining it for resale. They provide no other service in our view other than just being a conduit between two individuals, the manufacturer and the purchaser. In this particular instance, firms that are operating as a broker are not eligible for certification in our local programs, our MBE programs. The federal programs do allow certification of brokers under a different circumstance. Okay, certification process toward getting there begins with the application. We have an online application process, which we started in 2016. We're paperless in that regard. So we basically ask that all those that are interested in seeking certification go online. Our website is www.chicago.mwdbe.com. This is the online portal where you can do a number of things. You can apply for certification. You can also, once you're certified, you can go online, check your status, you can go to the directory and see who's out there, who's certified. You can do a number of different things under this process. So this is where you would begin that process for all of our certification programs. For our local programs, there's an application fee for processing. That application fee is $250, and this amount is billed to you after you submit your application and the city reviews and receives that application as being complete for review. So basically, it involves a process where you go online. In all cases, you would go online, complete your application. If it's a local program like the MBE, WBE program, we'll take a look at it, make sure that all the documents that should be there for review are there. If there's some things missing, we'll return the application to you electronically and basically tell you this is what we need in order to complete the review. So you'll submit it, we'll look at it. Once it's received, then we will then send you an invoice for the application fee. So you don't have to pay until the application has been sufficiently reviewed to be eligible for processing. If you're seeking certification as a DBE or ACDBE, there is no application fee, so you wouldn't have to worry about that. And if you're a member of let's say a disabled individual seeking certification as a BEPD, there's no application fee. So, I guess again, documentation we would need in addition to the application, basically it would be information about the business, yourself, what it is you do and how you do it. If I was to summarize this, and I think we lost the screen, if I'm going to summarize this, I would say tell the story. That's the best thing I can tell you. That will cover the next 5 slides. Tell the story. I mean, who are you? What it is you do? How do you do it? You know, we need to understand these things because we're looking at certifying businesses not just by the individual. It's more than enough to be a qualifying, let's say, minority or a woman. But you also have to have let's say, a purpose for your business. Your business is certified in a particular area, right, of activity. I mentioned Cordell McGarry, the plumber, right? You have to be able to demonstrate that, too. You also have an understanding and knowledge of what it is you do. How do you do it? And how did you come about learning that? So it's all about telling the story. And we ask for documentation that helps us to get to that point. And this is a list of some of them. So basically, we look for information, regarding the owners, the employees of the business, the facility that you're working out of, that you operate out of, financial information about the businesses, and in some cases, most cases, there may be a license requirement. Like, for example, if you're operating a store in Chicago, you should have a business license for that store or for the type of business that you're involved in. So I would advise you to, if you're seeking certification, to also check with the city department's business affairs and consumer protection department on the 8th floor to determine, what license may be required to operate your type of business. Okay. So we also look for information, again, regarding the individuals, like, for example, resumes. We need to understand basically not just who you are, but what it is you do and how you came about it. In some cases, we will ask for financial information. I'll kind of go into that in the next slide. But, for example, I may ask for tax returns for a business. If the business just got started, let's say within the last several days, you may not have that information. But that's not going to prevent you from applying. It just puts the burden on you in other ways to tell that story. So that's why I always go back to telling the story about your business, yourself, who you are, and how you came to be. Resumes help us do that. If you've been in business for a while and you've actually performed in your area of specialization, evidence of contracts that you may have completed would help us to understand basically what it is you do and how you do it. One of the biggest things that I hear, common terms I hear, is a person coming to me saying, well, okay, I'm a general contractor. Okay. And that's fine, but a lot of times we need to understand what your activity is as a general contractor because that's such a broad category. It can describe people that may be involved in, that may just have a license because they may do a particular type of work to a general contractor that's involved in the construction of a school or institution. So we kind of need to understand basically what you're doing. So when I say tell the story, I'm saying talk about yourself, what it is you do and how you do it. If you're submitting contracts, the evidence, the work you've done, it should kind of address the areas of specialization that you participate in. That's kind of important. We look at driver's licenses and birth certificates as a way to help us, determine your eligibility. For our federal programs, for example, you would need to be at least a legal resident of the United States. So that information is helpful in that regard. Businesses, they don't start, out of thin air, right? They involve some kind of investment. That investment could be the money you spent to buy the paper that you're, putting in your computer to type your business plan. It could be corporation fees that you had to file with the Secretary of State. Or it may be another form of investment, such as that business truck that you had to buy, or just money to start your bank account. All those things they're your equity investment in your business. We need to make sure that you've done that, you document that. So we will always ask for your equity contribution. That equity contribution should come from you as opposed to somebody else that may not be considered to be eligible, for a certification. So we'll look at that. If you've had a business bank account, okay, all right. If you have a business bank account, we want to see the signature cards for that. And in many cases, we would expect you to have that. Organizational chart. How is your business structured? Who basically is the head of the business? What operating departments do you have, if any? And who are the people that fall into those categories? Even if you're the only owner, you still have an organizational chart, right? It's just that you're everything. Okay. Equipment list. If you have a list of equipment that you're working with, that information should be submitted as well. There's any loan information that you may have that documents the investment in your business. The financial documents I referred to earlier, we look at 3 years of business tax returns. And in the event that you're a construction firm, we ask for 5 years of those taxes. And the reason why, like I said earlier, there's a business size standard, right? Where we look at basically whether or not your business is generating sales that may or may not exceed this standard. So again, going back to the example of Cordell McGarry the plumber, I've been in business since 2007. Because I'm in construction, I would need to have 5 years of my business tax returns. That basically, they'll look at them and they'll say, okay, the average sales for the 5 years, do they exceed the $16.5 million threshold by the SBA? If they don't, then I'm in. If they exceed that, then I'm not considered eligible. That's basically why we look for the information. In the event that you're a brand new business and you don't have this, we don't penalize you for it, but we do want you to tell us that, hey, you're a new business and you don't have the information. It helps us to understand. Again, tell that story. 4506T is a form that is normally gotten. It's an IRS form. We use it from time to time where we might need to verify tax information that's been submitted. It's a request for a transcript. We will normally ask you to provide this form along with your application. In the event that we look at a tax return and it's not, let's say, accurate, sometimes we get draft copies of tax returns instead of final copies, for example. We may need to verify that, so we'll then use the 4506T form to determine the actual return that was submitted. W-2s and 1099s. Basically, this refers to compensation of the owners. We normally will ask for this information, again, over a 3 to 5 year period, that's part of the documentation. In the event that a personal net worth statement is required, like for DBE and ACDBE, for example, they're required. If you're involved in construction, they're required. We would ask that you complete this form. And all these forms are available at our website as well. So after you've gotten all this information together, and typically on our online application, once you start that process, you have 90 days to kind of complete it. So you do have time to pull it all together. So don't feel as that you're rushed, but you can do it that way. But once you've submitted the application, then we receive it and start the process. We try to, make sure that we have all the information. We will go through a thorough review. We call it auditing here. We'll go through a thorough review of the information to verify that the individuals are in business, that they are who they are, they say they are, they have the background and skills that are required. And in some cases, we will actually do a site visit. We'll come out to interview the owners at their place of business. So if you're applying for certification as a DBE, our federal programs, that's automatic. If you're involved in construction in our local programs, or if you're a supplier, you operate a store or operation much like that, you will also be visited as part of the site visit. This is a general interview. We come out, we talk to you, we ask you about your business, basically how you got the background, how you got the skills, what's your motivation and desire for wanting to do it. It's not a hard thing to do. It's actually quite enjoyable, I think. It helps us to get to know you, and it helps, again, gives you an opportunity to tell your story. And that's what we're looking for, to help us determine whether or not this is a business that's eligible for certification. So once you've done that, and let's say you've been approved for certification under our local programs, the MBE, WBE, VBE, and BEPD, your certification lasts for 5 years. So once you're certified under the local programs, you're certified for a 5-year period. Under our federal programs, DBE, ACDBE, once you're certified indefinitely. There is no expiration. So it's like, until it's been determined that you're no longer eligible, let's say you become totally successful and you make In the case of an airport concessionaire, your sales exceed $60 million over 3-year periods and you're considered to be a success, you'll probably be in the program for a while. But the idea about the programs are to help you become a success. So we don't look at you being in the program forever and a day, but ultimately at one point actually graduating as a successful business. And that's what the program is all about. Before we talk about this, I did want to mention one other thing too. I talked about the expiration dates for local programs and non-expiration dates for our DBE, ACDBE. There's one thing you need to do. Every year, once you're certified, check in with us. Let us know about changes in the business. We call it filing a no-change affidavit. So every year after you're certified, you're going to send us an affidavit that basically says, either will say, there's been no changes in the ownership, the business structure, or its operation that would no longer, render me ineligible for certification. In the event that there has been a change, we ask that you let us know within 30 days of the change. So let's say, for example, there are 3 guys or 3 people that go into business, and during the course of the year, one person sells their business interest to someone else. So now you have a change in ownership. You need to let us know about the change of ownership. We need to understand basically who left, who's coming in, and what impact that will have on the business, for example. We ask that if you change your business location, change your address, send us a copy of the lease, give us information, just let us know. On an annual basis, we ask that you do this by at least sending us what's called a no-change affidavit. That applies to all of our programs. Okay, so throughout the process, we have relationships with 2 other agencies in the private sector. They're known as the Chicago Minority Supplier Development Council and the Women in Business Development Center. Each of these agencies I call private sector businesses or agencies, in that they also have certification programs. And these certification programs primarily serve, let's say, the private sector businesses. Like, for example, let's say Rush Hospital, University of Chicago. They have a commitment toward doing business with minority and women-owned businesses. Okay, so they have private sector programs, and they look for opportunities to actually engage them. So more often than not, a lot of people that are seeking certification for private sector businesses will go to these 2 agencies to get certified. Sometimes those people that are certified with those agencies, they may want to do business with the city as well. So they have to certify with us. We have a recognition process with these 2 agencies whereby the person that's certified with them first can come to us. They still have to apply, but we place a lot of weight on the fact that they're already certified with these 2 agencies. So that process can reduce the certification processing time, sometimes by as much as 30 days. So it's an abbreviated application in that sense. There's less documentation that may be required, and that's because we put a lot of, weight on the fact that you're certified with these 2 agencies. I mentioned earlier, all vendors must submit an annual no-change affidavit. Again, you have to notify us of any organizational changes. And I said 30 days. I'm mistaken. It's 10 days. Ooh. So keep that in mind. As soon as something happens, let us know. Let us know. And again, under our local programs, all MBE, WBE, VBE, BEPD certification firms must recertify every 5 years. Okay. Once you're certified, it doesn't end there. So again, I'm going back to my example, Cordell McGarry the plumber. I'm doing great business. I want to expand my scope of services to include electrical work. So I go back to school and I get some background credentials in doing electrical work. I get my license with the city as a electrical contractor. I want to add this to my certification. I need not reapply for certification, but I can seek to expand my current certification to include that electrical work, that new work that I'm doing. And that's a process that's quite simple to do. You can do it. There's no cost involved in doing it. We ask that you just pretty much submit a written letter on your corporate stationery, basically asking for the category that you're seeking to expand to. You provide us with supporting information that basically states that, okay, I'm asking for this particular scope, this is a change in what I do, and here's evidence that I can do the work. Here's evidence of the background. Again, if I have contracts that I've done in that area, all that helps. If I've updated my resume, provide the training that I've gotten, all that helps. I'm telling that story. And again, that's so much important if guys we do that. It's mentioned on the screen, again, the North American Industrial Classification System. That information is available from the Department of Census. You can just type in on your laptops, just type in the word NACIS codes. It'll take you right there. Again, it's an industry classification system that's used to identify, classify businesses by the type of industry that they're involved in. So again, for expansions, we could use information like licenses if needed, copies of future or present contracts you're involved in. If it involves insurance and the current resume, all these things help in telling that story. So, your certification doesn't stop with the city. We have sister agencies that are also involved. And the beauty of that is that these sister agencies, they all have their procurement departments. They all have spend budgets. They're all looking for services. And they're probably looking to do business with minority and woman-owned businesses, as well as people with disabilities. Here's the list of those agencies. So if you're looking for opportunities that go beyond just City of Chicago contracts, contact these other agencies, the public school systems. They spend a ton of money every year. They have each one of these agencies have their own budget. Cook County has a certification program like the cities for minority and women-owned businesses. I should also mention that our certification with the City of Chicago is accepted by Cook County, and Cook County accepts the City of Chicago certification, so there's no need to be certified by both agencies. We both accept one another's certifications. So that's one good thing to keep in mind. But again, any procurement opportunities, you'll want to contact them with regard to what's going on. The Park District, Building Commission, Housing Authority. Chicago Transit Authority pretty much is an agency that primarily works with the Department of Transportation. They rely upon the DBE certification, and that's what they offer, and that's most of their contracts will always involve DBE eligible firms. So all these agencies pretty much are agencies that have their own budgets, procurement opportunities, and they rely upon the city's certification, one or more of the city certification programs for looking at, determining whether or not a person is eligible. So, great resource to have. So after doing all of that, we come to the part that I consider to be probably something that we won't have to worry about, but I need to talk to you about it anyway. On occasion, businesses can be denied certification. And we basically think here are the top 10 reasons as to why that's the case. The very first one is unsubstantiated or questionable ownership and control. Tell that story. If we don't understand basically who's owning the business or who's involved in the business or who's controlling the business, then we can't make a determination whether or not minorities or women or other groups are in control or eligible for certification. So that's probably that's the important thing. Tell that story. Unclear description of critical functions and who's responsible. Again, it's all going to go back. I could probably say tell the story 10 times, really. But let's just say again. We look for business owners to have a technical understanding of what it is they do. We also want them to be able to control what it is they do. And that goes not just for hire and fire, but that also is in being able to make the decisions that are necessary for the business to operate without having to be dependent on someone that may not be an eligible individual. So if it's not basically clear to us about that, again, that could be a basis for denial. The company cannot substantiate where or how startup funds expansion capital was initiated. Proof of contribution. Again, you contribute something to that business. It needs to be documented, and we also need to understand where the funds came from. So let's say, for example, if my former employer, who's a non-eligible individual, gave me $10,000 to start my own business, which is basically doing what they might do, that could be questionable as to whether or not I would have an obligation to that individual. Or that individual now could be in a position where they can influence the decisions that I make. Control is important, and we want to make sure that when you invest in your business, that the funds come from you or are under your control. Outside secondary employment takes the majority of the certified firm's time each day. This is probably more applicable to startup businesses, and basically it could be looked at like this. I start my business today, plumbing business. I haven't had a chance to generate any business, right? So I don't have any sales. But I gotta eat, right? I gotta pay rent, I gotta pay a house note, I have to pay utilities, so that means I probably have to work. So the question then becomes, how can I work and run my business? we look at the standpoint of the business when it's an operation that it's being managed by the owner, right? So this particular point we're looking at, it's from the standpoint of that when you're in business, you should be there. Doesn't mean that you have to be working 40 hours a week starting off the bat, but whenever your business is in operation, you should be there. And there shouldn't be any other thing, which is commonly employment, that takes you away from that. So let's say, for example, if my plumbing business is running while I'm working at the post office or driving a bus, the question would be, how am I running this business? I must be, a question, it becomes an issue of, well, who am I dependent on? And again, I have to be there. So basically, we recognize again that you have to live. Just keep in mind that, when you're when you're doing your business, you need to be there. So there's no requirement as to whether or not you work 8 hours a day, 10 hours a day, or 5 days a week. But when that business is in operation, you should be that business. The company is not located in one of the 6 county regions. So again, that applies to our local programs. The target goal of the local programs is to provide employment opportunities, job opportunities, business ownership for the local residents of the region. I mean, these programs are designed to assist Chicagoans and people in the Chicagoland area, not so much as someone maybe from Memphis. I mean, it's great, but the ideas about doing economic development in our region, it should be primarily supported for those individuals. So that's, if your business is not located in one of the 6 county regions, or the majority of your workforce is not there, then technically you wouldn't be eligible for certification with the city. There may be other agencies, but not the city. So point 6, the point of contact did not respond to requests for information in a timely manner. During the review of the application, once you submitted everything, we go through a thorough review. Sometimes we might have a need to ask questions, or there may be another document or so we might need to help us in our review. What we attempt to do at that point is we'll reach out to you. We'll typically reach out to you through our online portal. We'll send you what's called a Q&A, or basically a message that basically lets you know that we need this information in order to complete our review. In some cases, we'll even call you to try to reach out to you, to talk to you about it personally. But in the event that we reach out to you and you don't respond in a timely manner, and we typically will give you at least 30 days in total to respond or so, then technically we have to move on, because there's so many applications that we have to process. So that can be a basis for denial. So when you hear from us, then we try to respond. Even if you need additional time, just let us know that you're working on it. I mean, that helps us to work with you, and that's what we want to do. We want to work with you, not kick you to the curb or anything in that sense. Inconsistencies with the applicant's firm name among various documents. I run across this more often than I care to think about. Typically, when you're doing business, use the proper name for your business. If you work under an assumed name, document that. I mean, let's be clear. I've seen applicants come in and say, "Well, I'm the XYZ Corporation," and then I might get an application that says XY. I mean, an abbreviation of the name. I may understand who it is, but legally, when it comes down to being on a contract, it's not going to hold up, because there's inconsistencies in that regard. So, and there are so many variations of companies that are out there. That abbreviation that you might use might identify another company. So it's important that we have the firm name that's consistent and it's the proper name. Problems with contracts missing or complete information, and I'm reading it as it goes off, or not signed and executed by qualifying owners. We ask for contracts that helps us to understand basically the work that you've performed, how you've done it, and what your role is in it. Sometimes we'll get contracts, and I'll get the first page of the contract, and I'll get the last page of the contract, the evidence that they signed it, but I get nothing in between that told me what you did, the scope of your work. And that information is important to help us to determine what it is you're seeking to be certified in. So we get documents that are required, or required documents are not attached. We try to catch this part in our intake process when we look at the application before receiving it. But in some cases, they might get through. A typical example in this case might be tax return. We ask for 3 years of tax returns for the years, let's say 16, 17, and 18, we get the application. I might get 2 copies of the 17 return, 1 of the 16 return, or 1 of the 18 return, no 17, 2 of the 16. You know what I mean? I got 3 tax returns, right? And I think that's a common error. Well, that could result in us reaching out to you, asking for that information. Your failure to respond could also, result in you being denied. And that ties into the very last part, really, the 5 years of tax returns or 3 years as may need it were not submitted or signed. Again, we try to catch these things, we try to reach out to you, but they can be the basis for denial. So here's the basic 10 reasons why, and they're all avoidable if we just tell the story. I mean, that's my mantra around here. They get tired of me upstairs talking about tell the story, but that's important in life. So basically, we do training, outreach, and communications. We have a link here to all of our different avenues of social media. www.facebook.com. You can go to Twitter. We are also on YouTube, and of course, cityofchicago.org. DPS. So what I didn't mention is that we also have relationships with assist agencies, and you can go to our website and get a list of the assist agencies. They're local, most often than not, they're local chambers of commerce or small business development corporations that are, in the cases, are funded by maybe the SBA. They provide technical assistance to businesses. Many of them are also familiar with our certification process. So in the event you can't reach us, they can also be of an aid to help you in the process itself. So I encourage you to reach out to those groups. And again, on our website, you can find a list of those assist agencies itself. But at any rate, our number is 312-744-4900. We're located at option number 1, because you have 3 options once you dial that number. 1 will get you to certification. Option 2 will get you to compliance. Option 3, if need be, will get you to contract administration. For certification purposes, if you dial 312-744-4900, option 1, you'll be greeted by one of our certification officers who's always available to answer your questions, to help and provide you with any guidance that you might need. So option 3 is for contract compliance, but for certification purposes, the most important option is 1. Keep that in mind. So that being said, I thank you for having me. Are there any questions?
Yes.
Okay.
So my business has been operating for 3 months, and I want to get certified. So I was told that I had to wait 3 months to become BEPD certified. And I called this number.
Okay. Interesting. So your question was that you were told that you had to wait 3 months before you applied for certification? That's not true. In all honesty, you can apply as soon as you organize your business. You legally organize your business. You file your paperwork. Let's say if you're a corporation, you file your papers with the Secretary of State. You've established your business. You can apply right away. There's no waiting period that you must be in business before you apply. Again, that's one reason why you have to tell that story, because at one time there used to be a requirement that you had to wait 2 years, but that was changed quite a bit ago, some time ago. Any other questions?
What was that office you mentioned to talk to about what type of license would be required?
Okay, that would be you asked a question about business licenses and where to go regarding that. That would be the Department of Business Affairs and Consumer Protection. BACP is the acronym. We live on acronyms here in the city. They're located on the 8th floor, room 805. As soon as you come off the elevators, you'll see them. Yes, sir.
I work for a company that wants to do business with the city of Chicago that never has done business with Chicago before. They don't qualify as a certified company. So, but as you had talked about in your talk, that there are companies that can bring certified companies with them as subcontractors, and there's a certain goal amount for the contract on bids. Is that correct?
So to answer your question, let me rephrase the question, if you will. So first off, you're asking about businesses that aren't certified doing business with the city of Chicago.
Correct.
Anyone can do business with the city of Chicago. So you also asked the question about maybe businesses that wouldn't be eligible for certification also working with businesses that are certified for contract opportunities. So we're talking about a prime contractor-subcontractor relationship, and that's perfectly acceptable.
And there are certain percentage goals that are stated for subcontractors that are written in the bids?
Yes, that's part of the compliance process. Like say, for example, in our local programs, and I'm speaking of the MBE, WBE, BEPD programs, we normally have goals of, let's say, 25 and 5. So 25% business, let's say we set a goal of 25% business participation on let's say, non-construction contracts for minority participation. So, or 5% for women. So basically, let's say if you're XYZ company, you want to participate in a contract that's involved $1 million, and you want to subcontract to a minority firm, ABC company. In this situation, the presumption would be that ABC company, if they're the only minority contractor involved, would take up 25% of that bid, or would be participating in the amount of $250,000.
Right.
In that sense.
So you gave us a link to a website, and on that website, I believe you said that there's a directory or a list of certified companies.
Mm-hmm.
And so if we were to want to join with a certified company to bid on a particular bid that's out there, that we would be able to access that directory then?
Yes.
And contact the certified company and ask for them to join us on the bid. Is that how it works?
That's how it works. So the question then goes back to the earlier statement, which references the benefits of certification. So the gentleman was pretty much saying if he's looking for, let's say, a minority company, how would he do it? And you can go to a directory. We have a directory that's located on our website, www.chicagomwdbe.com. It's the same website for applying. You can also go there to do a search in the directory of minority and women-owned firms. And it will list the firms by the type of business, contact person, the owner, and whether or not they're minority or women-owned or veteran-owned or a combination of all. Okay. Okay.
Can not-for-profit organizations qualify for these same certifications?
Okay, that's, I would say no. The programs were designed, with one exception, the programs were designed for for-profit concerns. The one exception to that would be the BEPD program, Business Enterprises for People with Disabilities. Sometimes some business structures in this arena would consist of nonprofit associations that provide services to people with disabilities, and they're involved in that particular sense. So they can be eligible for certification, but the business programs were designed for for-profit concerns. Okay.
And I came in late, so
No problem.
maybe you cover this. If one was to register the WBE and BBE, is that two separate applications? Or is it like...
That's a good question, and I'll repeat the question. So what was asked was that if is it possible to apply for MBE, if you're an MBE and a WBE, would it be necessary to apply two separate times? No. No. So here's how it would work. Our local programs all can be done on one application. That's the MBE, WBE, VBE, and BEPD. That one application can be used for all those certifications. Okay. So when you go online, you'll want to check off the categories that will apply to you. Because the DBE and ACDBE programs are federal programs and they're governed under a different set of regulations, you would be required to complete an application, a separate application for those programs. But again, if you're looking for a certification as a DBE and an ACDBE, you can use the one application for both. So technically, if let's say I'm a black male. Okay, I can apply for at least 2 programs, maybe 3. Those programs could be the local MBE program. I can also apply as a DBE with the federal government. And if I plan to operate a business at the airport, say for example, maybe a restaurant or a concession stand at the airport, I can also apply for ACDBE. If I'm a minority woman, I can apply for all those programs that will apply. If I'm a veteran, I can apply for it. I've actually seen several business owners that applied for 4 programs. different programs. I mean, it's, again, look at the certifications as tools in a tool belt. You know, they don't guarantee business, but they're there to help you, you know, when you compete for business opportunities. So you want to have as much ammunition or as many tools as possible on this tool belt so that when you need it, it's there. So that's what, so feel free, you can apply for as many as you think would apply for you, apply to you. And one other thing too I would also want to mention is when it comes down to applying for certification, we try our best to turn around applications within 90 to 120 days from the time when they're submitted and they're in our process. We also recognize that there are certain factors that sometimes can also impede upon that, such as maybe an incomplete application or a seasonality, for example, things like that that could also impact on that time. So we try to encourage everyone to apply for certification as much in advance as possible. I always personally say, don't wait until it's time, the bid opportunity comes out, and all of a sudden I want to try to apply, because it typically doesn't work out in that regard. I have a personal analogy that I use. It generally refers to the fact that it's 5 minutes to midnight, and the coach is about to turn into a pumpkin, and the hostess are about to turn into mice, and here I come coming down the stairs, trying to catch that ride. You don't want to be in that situation. You want to be ready when the opportunity comes, and in that sense, give yourself as much time as possible to apply for certification. It's a business tool. Yes, ma'am.
I just had a question for you. What's the difference between the WBE and the WOSB?
Okay, the WOSB is a government program. It's a federal government program. It's for, typically, it's SBA. It's driven with the SBA, and the acronym stands for Women-Owned Small Businesses. So it's not part of the WBE program, which is a local city program for women-owned business enterprises. So it's done by two different agencies. That's the thing. So like WOSB is federal. SBA has its own certification programs like the 8A, things like that. That would be a federal program, and MWB would be a local program. Just one other thing too, the state, for example, has a series of certification programs. We're all basically trying to provide opportunities for small businesses. So you might see variations in the program. The state has a program, it's called BEP, Business Enterprise Program. That acronym refers to businesses that are owned by minorities, women, and people with disabilities. So again, you will see that it's the same kind of a program, but it's targeted towards the state's pot of monies that they're using. They have their own budget as well. So for programs like that, you'll want to contact those agencies to get more information. Okay. So I appreciate you taking the time in this hot room to be with me. But any questions, please feel free to give us a call. Again, the number is 312-744-4900, option 1. And again, we'll be more than happy to answer your question and to help you throughout this process. We're here to help. Thanks again.
Can you take just a second and fill out that evaluation and leave it on that table? I greatly appreciate it. And I know it's hot in here today. Hopefully the next time you come, it won't be that way. All right.